That's what it really was, yeah.
Good evening, our audience. This time I'd like to call the March 26th Planning Board meeting to order. The first item on the agenda are minutes of the Executive Committee meeting. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to approve the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting.
Second.
Okay, just the three of us will be voting on that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. Motion carries.
Should that mean that we have abstained, all the others besides you three?
No,
You weren't there.
We're just not involved.
Yeah, you're not involved, right.
I could approve of it.
Sorry to cut you out of that. The next item on the agenda is an approval not required.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we have minutes of regular minutes of March 5th and March 12th that need to be approved.
Well, they're not on the agenda, so we'll have to let those go.
Did we actually get the
Are they on the
fifth?
agenda?
March 5th?
March 5th?
We
and-
just did
and
March 5th.
No, March 5th of the Executive,
Okay.
but I have reviewed both March 5th and March 12th.
Apologize, my fault. I'm going to have March 12th on the agenda.
Okay, but okay.
I
Well,
only
we're ready
saw-
for the next time because they have been revised.
So I saw the 12th, but I must have missed the 5th minutes. Did anybody else miss that?
No,
Just me?
The agenda says March 5th.
Paul made, on the regular meeting minutes, Paul made comments on both the 5th and the 12th. And I have changed them, and I'm ready to approve them the next time they're on the agenda.
Okay, we'll make sure it's on.
Okay. I understood that the March 5th minutes on the agenda were for the Executive Committee.
There's
Was I
both.
in error?
There's both.
Both. Okay,
Planning board.
okay. All right. So, Mr. Secretary, for the minutes of our regular meeting for March 5th.
I move that they be approved as revised.
Second.
Discussion.
I guess I must have just missed them, so
Okay.
don't worry about it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained.
I
All right.
understand. I was like, yeah, I don't think it was there.
You may not have been there, Rich.
I assume
Right.
we made the changes.
I posted your changes.
Okay.
As you
All right, they're approved. The next item on the agenda is an approval not required. The applicant's Woodbuyer Senior Living LLC to subdivide the existing 19.21 acres into one lot and one open space parcel located at 389 Gifford Street, Falmouth.
Where's Gifford Street? Oh,
Is there someone here for the applicant?
Yes, my name is Mike McGrath. I'm a registered professional land surveyor. I work for Homes of McGrath. We prepared the plan. I think you all know that on Gifford Street, Tree is building the second new building. As part of the approvals at different levels, Tree agreed to create some open space. They've already created or have recorded an easement, a conservation easement on this land, but they made a commitment that it would be conveyed to the 300 committee. So the purpose of the plan is to show the metes and bounds of the land that's going to be conveyed to the 300 committee.
Everybody got a copy of that they've seen? Okay, comments from the staff?
This is tied out to endorse.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. McGrath or anybody of each other? Okay. Then I need a motion to endorse this approval not required.
I move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Thank you very much.
Motion carries. Thank you. Excuse me, Jim.
Is it paid?
Question is,
The next item on the agenda is discussion. Two items, site plan review tutorial by Mr. Curry and the special permit tutorial by Mr. Curry. Mr. Curry, you're up.
So tonight, folks, relax, take it easy. These are two-hour courses. So they get to 11.
You may be here until 11.
Talk fast.
They are actually put together by the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative. They're a collaborative of regional planning agencies and the University of Massachusetts, their planning association, and others. They actually put together these presentations that are put together statewide for all planning boards, zoning boards, throughout the Commonwealth.
This line's gonna go.
So there might be some things here that might be germane to someone in Belchertown, but being that these are germane here, but I've chosen not to change anything in these presentations, although I have the liberty to do so. I try to condense it down, so we're here no more than, we'll spend an hour on site plan review, take a break, come back and maybe spend an hour on special permits. With your permission, Ralph, it's ask me a question at any time.
Sure.
If you don't understand something, I'll go over it again. But this is basically to give you an overview of some of the things you do as a planning board. You're going to be seeing this more and more often. We actually have some more plans for you to look at as plan review and also special permits. And so it's important that you understand the distinction between the two. It's oftentimes a cloudy issue, even though Rich has been on board a long time. Many of you here have never issued a special permit. So we'll go right into it.
Brian, would you swing that mic around just a little bit more towards you, because we won't be speaking much, I don't think.
Okay. And I'll see if I can actually, the remote is gone.
Would you want to use this mic then?
No, I'm all set.
Okay.
I'm all set. So I'll try to go through these.
Can we get a copy of the Cliff Notes before the final exam?
There will be a final exam, it's open book. You'll have your books open when you have a plan review or a special permit in front of you, it's like the zoning bylaw, and you bring these along too. So what we'll start off with really is what is a plan review? What is it? It really, and here's some key words in here I'll point out to you. It really establishes layouts and scales, appearance, safety, all the things you see in there. Regards safety and environmental impacts of commercial and industrial development. Most site plan reviews throughout the Commonwealth just look at business zones. Not often do they see the multifamily that we see, but we do see multifamily as part of our plan reviews. We try to fit large projects of the Commonwealth into site plan reviews. Although here in Falmouth, a large project is anything over 1,000 square feet. Oftentimes, we see very small plans that are pretty easy to do. We try to focus on parking, traffic, drainage, and roadways. Some people look at roadway construction when we get into the site plan for the hospital. We look at Territory Drive, intersections. And I think the key word to take home here on this very first slide is that we're looking for the best possible design for the location. Site plan review is all about design. And we'll come back to that time and time again. It's really all about something that's formula-driven. You'll hear that over a discretionary permit, which is you can use your discretion, which is a special permit. We'll be talking about that a lot more. I just want to state that.
Brian,
Yeah.
what is a larger project? What defines a larger project as opposed to a regular project?
I looked at projects in a million square feet when we were looking at Canal Side Commons up in Bourne as a development regional. That's about the largest we've ever seen here. I tend to large projects are somewhere, over 10,000 square feet for our community standards, in the larger.
So, I hate to start questioning right away, but
Yeah.
establishes criteria for layout, scale, and appearance. So we have not really focused on appearance, and we always kind of deflect away from that.
We do, because I learned, I told you that the formula stuff and the discretionary. Appearance is usually landscaping, how the buildings are placed on the lot, as opposed to architecture. Architecture is something that we don't have a very good handle on at the zoning level. Even as a special permit granting authority, we have a design review committee that tends to look at certain architectural styles. But again, it's non-discretionary. They look, it's formula driven. They don't have any ability to say to an applicant, you have to use this particular architectural.
So it's the appearance of the site.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Architecture.
design of the site, because it's a site plan review. So that's a good pickup.
Architecture is aesthetic. When we talk about appearance in architecture, we talk about aesthetics. In a very subjective, not at all conducive to being evaluated from any form.
Right. So, a little history. Chapter 48 is absolutely silent about site plan review, as opposed to a special permit. A site plan review process, they're all created by your local zoning bylaw. That's why they're all, you'll see later on, distinctive, sort of crafted to meet local standards. They've been approved by the courts, done, as an administrative review, as opposed to an adjudicatory review where property rights are being decided through a special permit. The key word there is site plan reviews are not permits. It's an administrative review approved by the courts pursuant typically to a building permit. We'll be talking about that later too. I can get this right. So we'll compare it a little bit to a special permit. And these are really key words we pulled out, you'll see over and over again. How does a site plan review compare to a special permit? Well, a special permit, you have a full range of discretion. That's the key word. A site plan review is the regulation of a use rather than its prohibition. You've heard that be said again and again. Typically can't deny a site plan review. You can use it to shape a project. You can only deny it in very rare circumstances. The SJC has come down on that. And the key case, if you want to read about it, is Whitey Dugout versus the town of Canton. And those are the words that the Supreme Court used. Is site plan reviews are the regulation of the use rather than its prohibition. That's the key difference between that and a special permit.
YD initials?
YD, Dugout, versus the town of Canton.
DUGOUT?
Yeah. There's actually a string of cases from the 50s into the 60s from our friends in the town of Canton. Who can be a site plan review board? The Zoning Act is very specific as to who can be a special permit granting authority. But site plan review boards are typically planning boards throughout the Commonwealth because you have the experiences under the subdivision control law. You're usually familiar with the engineering lingo, layout of sites, layout of lots. Most site plan review boards are planning boards. But it could be a city council, it could be a board of selectmen. Sudbury, it's the board of selectmen. It's very rare for a zoning board to be a site plan review authority because they're often the special permit granting authority or the permit granting authority. Some of the older models out there, you can actually have staff-driven site plan review boards. Town of Barnstable, there are no appointed boards. It's just the staff. The town planner, the building commissioner, the health agent. There's absolutely no public official appointed or elected that takes part in the plan review process. As opposed to some other Cape towns where you actually have a hybrid board. You have a member of the Board of Health, member of the Planning Board, member of the Board of Selectmen. It's a very small town. And they probably sit on many boards, but they actually have a hybrid board. Typically speaking, though, your site plan review board is your planning board.
Right.
Yep.
To clarify, like, 24216 doesn't come in at all on site plan review?
Not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
That's,
Nope, we'll be talking about that.
We'll get there, I know.
In the second hour.
that's a key point, though, it breaks it.
Doesn't come into play at all.
Right.
Not one bit. So what is the special site plan, or the site plan review process? There's two processes. It's when a user structure also requires a special permit or a variance, or when the user structure does not require any other permit. We're going to focus specifically tonight on the second bullet point, because 90% of the site plan reviews you do follow that process. The examples I have for you tonight are the maintenance shed at the Woodsall Country Club. Didn't require a special permit. The Charles Goward plan of the office building in Davisville didn't require a special permit. The bank on East Main Street, across from the gas station, didn't require a special permit. It's just a site plan review. And that's going to be most of the time when you see that. That's what we're going to focus a little bit here tonight. Typically, in many towns, you actually have the site plan review board is a special permit hearing. I know in the city of Weymouth, the planning board does, they're a really regulatory board. They do all the special permits and they do the site plans too. There's better coordination that way sometimes, but many times do it just the way we do it. Okay, so when you get to this site plan review process we're talking about tonight, we only require a building permit. Again, the key words are that, like under DY dugout, it's a process to impose reasonable conditions before the issuance of a building permit. Site plan review is attached to an as-of-right use. You can't use it to deny the as-of-right use. You notice that typically speaking, under this process, we don't have a public hearing as opposed to a public meeting. So you really can't get into some of the things in site plan review that we can do here under site plan review, like we can under special permits. The key case of this language here is called Prudential Insurance Company versus the Board of Appeals of Westwood. You want to take a look at that? That's the key. This case is an appeals court case that you just simply can't deny a site plan review that's properly in front of you. But what can you do on a site plan review that you find that's a little bit intractable? There are three things. There's three tests when we get to a site plan review. You always hear me say it has to provide you adequate information. So if you get a site plan review that you don't even know, you can't tell what's going on, it's a procedural denial. You can deny it on lack of substance or lack of information. Usually speaking, we impose a reasonable condition to prove. Okay, we don't, so long as it fits within the formula of the bylaw. Someone has their curb cuts within 300 feet of each other. You have to then say, okay, no, the formula says, the bylaw says, they have to be 300 feet, it has to go here. You can reject a site plan, and this is extremely rare. Like I said, in the 23 years I've been in this community, we rejected one once on substance, where it was so intractable, of the hundreds of site plans we've done, one has been rejected. So the courts have been very circumspect, and all their attorneys are very circumspect to say, yes, technically you have that ability, but it is exceedingly rare that you would actually reject a site plan and not reasonably condition. I'm going to skip these two because in this community, we have a process that you actually notify abutters, it's on the agenda. Some communities, they literally, they bring the plan to the planning board. The planning board looks at it on their agenda and sends their comments down to the building commissioner. They don't even have the applicant there. So I'll skip these two slides. So what can you do when you get to a site plan that should really be focusing on? And I'll have a plan from another community that you use as a example. It's a plan actually from Lemonster. The key things we always try to look for site plan reviews are your pedestrian and vehicular access in and out of the site. We typically don't look at the road itself. In the very rare circumstances where we look at an intersection, or say when the hospital was coming in, the fact that a road was a dead end. Very rarely do we get into that, and it has to be approved by your zoning bylaw. It has to be somewhere in there that you look at the abutting public roads. We try to look at the parking and loading areas on your site plan review very carefully. We try to look at the landscaping, the screening, and the buffers, especially, and you'll see in the example, relative to the adjacent land uses. We try to take a good close look at the lighting on the site. You can look at signs under our local bylaw, but we don't approve them anymore. There used to be signs were under the zoning bylaw, and happiest day of my professional career here is when they took it out. Good signs could be problematic. We try to look very intently at stormwater management. We always say we try to keep the stormwater on the site, or if it's going to leave the site into the public domain, to the private property, then our engineers they look at that very closely. We look at our water and wastewater systems, because the fire department wants to know where hydrant locations are, and in certain instances when the bylaw allows us to, we look at where we're going to need natural. In some towns like Nantucket and Lincoln and Lexington and others, they have an architectural review board at this site plan review to advise ReOwn as where we see architectural style and scale. We don't do that here very often because we have a historic districts commission and we have a design review.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could we, if we chose to then, seeing as how it seems to be in the purview?
It has to be in the bylaw.
In the town?
In the town's bylaw. In our community, we delegated certain responsibilities to the district's commission. Architecture, we delegated it to the design review committee somewhat. But we don't get into it like some other towns do, and it can't be mandatory. It could be something that you might say, gee whiz, the district's commission is mandatory. They have very strict architectural rules. It's based on a public purpose, such as the historic preservation of these homes. But typically speaking, under zoning, it's a site plan review, it's formula driven. You don't have discretion.
So that, if we were to choose that, that would have to take a discussion and a vote of the board and go to town meeting to ask for a change if we chose for that.
In some towns, they look at single-family homes, and the town of Lincoln reviews single-family homes. I would never make that recommendation here under the circumstances that we find ourselves today. It could change someday, but it works for the town of Lincoln and their community standards, but I don't think in this community, except in the historic districts, are we looking at architecture.
I would certainly never expect to look at individual houses, but large commercial projects maybe.
Yeah, you could, maybe. But under zoning, it's very difficult to get into methods and materials of construction. And aesthetics, as Rich indicates, it's a legitimate issue under zoning, but when it gets into the architectural style, it can be very, very hard to.
Is this entirely left up to the design review committee?
Yeah, right now,
This component?
They're advisory.
Advisory to who?
The applicant, and to the boards that come in, they would give us an application like on Mr. Dalbert's project, and they'll say, we think you should have this type of deciduous tree, we think the building should be moved here, if you could have a pitched roof, that'd be great, and it's something we can negotiate with the applicant.
So is there a referral from one board to another, or how does the process work between the design review committee and us in zoning, or are they totally all independent?
They're separate boards, but there's a referral process built into the bylaw. It says under so many days, you send one out to them, and in so many days, they give one back to us. And they look at certain design components that aren't really within your purview, nor their purview either. It's just more of a recommendation to the applicant.
So if we saw something that gave us question, we could at least refer it to them for their comments.
Correct. And
Okay.
they might come back and
Say, don't worry about it, or whatever.
I'm not an expert on the types of trees that should be in parking lots, let's say, but they may have someone on the design review committee who has a great deal of knowledge about that. Gee whiz, those trees are going to die. They can't take the heat. You may ask them to change that to another species.
So if we saw something that gave us pause,
Yeah,
we could at least say, okay, I think we need to refer this to this design review committee, get their comments on our questions, and then it moves forward.
right. But again, remember, site
Just-
plan review, non-binding.
Right,
formal-
just process only, so
Process only.
that's all I'm talking about.
Yeah, we can do that. Here are some of the conditions that we typically focus on here. Not typically, we can't focus on here. Disposal of solid waste, that's always the infamous dumpster location. Always seems to be a favorite. We have a 2-year limit on commencement of construction under site plan review. It mimics a special permit. We had it, but there it is. We do have some restrictions on the possession or use of hazardous materials in certain overlay districts. So again, the bylaw has to allow you to be able to do that. Water resource protection districts, if someone came in to do certain storage of materials, you have the ability of the site plan review to say, yes, no, maybe it has to go over here, or you have to have certain 110% capture in your design. We don't do signs anymore. We can't look at alarm systems. Site plan review can do a certain number of limits on vehicles, number of occupants in the building, and noise limits, so long as it's built into the bylaw. So if in fact the bylaw says you can only have so many vehicles on a site, 3 unregistered vehicles, 2 commercial vehicles, you can say, all right, you have your school bus, you have your pickup truck, you have your tow truck. Anything over that, we can't approve. We need to go see the Board of Appeals for a special permit.
Why can't we say something like, a drive-through lane is not permitted because of conditions on the site are not conducive to...
Under a site plan review, it's all formula-driven. If it meets the criteria in the bylaw, you have no discretion. Meets the criteria, no discretion. Site plan review, it's just a review. As opposed to a special permit where you have a full range of discretion. With the site plan review, it's all performance-based. I mean, it's all formula-based.
Brian, specifically to that question, the distance for drive-throughs from one to another, what is that criteria that we have?
I think it's 300 feet.
300 feet. So if it's more than 300 feet,
No discretion.
we have no discretion. That's the number that we're looking at.
No discretion.
Thank you.
We also do maintenance guarantees on certain projects. We have landscaping requirements. You know, we always get the parking spaces. Not too much industrial control or sewer connections here. We do require bonds on certain projects. Usually it's as a requirement to get your occupancy permit if certain things aren't completed, like your landscaping or your top course of bituminous. You can impose hours of operation only if the bylaw lets you. If there's something in there with regards, if you're looking at a site plan for gravel mining, whatever, or something, if the bylaw specifies you can only be on certain hours, and you can put that in. Police details, again, this is Commonwealth-wide, if it's in your bylaw. Under special circumstances, you can actually require somewhat extraordinary, say a school's running out, you've got a contractor's yard, you may require some kind of extraordinary traffic.
Is that in our bylaw, do you know?
It is not.
So that's not something we could impose.
It's not something you can do under this bylaw, but I see that you can do it, if the courts have upheld it as something appropriate in a zoning bylaw, by the site plan review board could impose, if they had the formula built in.
But
We
we
have-
don't, so we can.
You don't, no discretion.
Okay, that's the point, was important.
There you go, no discretion.
That's it. I thought once you miss a meeting, you get
You
joined.
need a majority vote for a site plan review, majority of those present and voting. Right now, this 7-member board, you need a 4. If you had 4 members, you would need a majority of that, which would be 3 out of 1,000,000. The good news about a site plan review, we don't have to accept Mass General Law, Chapter 39, because it's an administrative review. If you miss a meeting, it's not a hearing, it's not a permit, you can actually vote on it. So it's a majority of those present and voting. Someday, maybe we'll adopt Chapter 39, but I don't think I'll tell you the truth. There's no guidance about a constructive approval, about a site plan review. In Falmouth, we have 90 days. It's built into our bylaw. There's no guidance on what happens if you go beyond 90 days. Is there a constructive approval? We've always made our deadlines, or we get letters to extend. And we have that in our bylaw to extend. Typically speaking, again, because it's not a permit, there's no constructive approvals unless it's built in. And just because it's not a permit, it's an administrative review, there's no vested rights. Again, all these would be in comparison to special permits. No vested rights for a site plan, no constructive approval for a site plan, and we'll see that's a little different when it gets to the special permit conditions. Judicial appeal, again. If it's a site plan review being attached to a special permit or a variance, like we saw at the first couple slides on bullet point, it goes, it's a section 17 appeal, goes to Superior Court. When you do a site plan review here in Falmouth, it's actually a letter that goes down to the building commissioner. It's attached to the building permit. So if someone didn't like a condition that you imposed, the only appeal, the appeal procedure is not to the courts. They would have to, the building permit would have to issue from the building commissioner. And technically, it would then be appealed to the Board of Appeals. Because the issuance of the building permit and conditions imposed on a building permit actually go to them for review.
Then to the courts.
And then to the courts, correct. So that's the background and history of our site plan reviews. The key take-home words are, you don't have discretion. It's formula-based. It has to be in the bylaw. You have to look it up. The key sections of the bylaw to look at are Articles 22, 23, and 24. That's usually where you're going to find all your formula-based standards. And they are your performance standards for stormwater drainage, parking, landscaping, all the things you saw on those bullet points. And those those would be your checklist type standards that you will see under site plan.
We could write tougher standards into the bylaw, because that would have to be approved by town meeting.
Let's go to town meeting.
We could do that.
You could.
Uh,
In fact, when put the parking regulations in, went to town meeting. When we did the landscaping bylaw, went to town meeting. We did stormwater, it all goes to town meeting. They approve the formula. You, as an administrative board, particularly, are just the ministers of the checklist.
There's no formula specified by the state.
Chapter 48 is silent. There's no statutory reference in Chapter 48 to site plan review. It's all local creation.
The only constraint on the formula is it cannot be so stringent as to amount to a constructive denial. It must be purely regulatory and reasonably regulatory as opposed to prohibited.
Right, let's say the bylaw or your application of the bylaw.
The bylaws themselves.
The bylaw has to be, the attack on the bylaw will be judicial. It could be, it shows the criteria in the bylaw is not supported by the case law or the statute. Your application of that standard is different. If that's what you've been authorized to impose, you're authorized to impose it. Someone will have to go back to the bylaw to attack that. If you have a formula in the bylaw that says that you need 15 parking spaces for your 5,000 square foot building, and you decide, I got a few more to go. Thanks, Frank. Where was I? If you've misapplied one of the formulas that's in the bylaw that's reasonable, and you have said, well, we don't particularly like that, we want you to have 30 parking spaces, then that could be rejected by the Board of Appeals, and we'll look at it and say, well, you don't have that ability when they review the appeal of the building. You don't have that discretion.
Just to, I don't want to get specific, but let's say we were looking at something that was the wrong distance from one area and didn't have the right amount of parking space on the other. That's something we can just not approve the plan, because it goes directly to not meeting the specifications we have in our bylaw.
You can reasonably condition it. Most of them are reasonably conditioned.
Right.
You can say, all right, you need to increase your parking from 10 to 15. You need to move the building back to comport with setbacks. And 99.9% of the times we can do that. Once in a great blue moon, we find a plan so intractable that we find no reasonable solution.
So that's our answer, that when we find those things, that we cannot come up with a solution.
There's reasonably a solution.
Reasonable solution.
Reasonable solution. Right. So, gee whiz, we've got the tractor trailer offloading gasoline in the middle of the parking lot. Where can we put it?
And we can't figure it out.
We can't keep it there. We can't figure it out. It's just so intractable that this site is not going to.
Doesn't work. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
3 times you mentioned the term reasonable, can impose reasonable conditions.
Right.
What, can you give some definition of who interprets reasonableness in a site plan review?
Reasonable means that they're within the bounds of the bylaw that binds you. You don't really determine the reasonable conditions. You find them in the bylaw to impose. That gets to Richard's application, or question about who defines reasonableness or who defines the application of the bylaw. If the bylaw itself is unreasonable, it's to the courts. If you've misapplied it, then you're being unreasonable. But you find those conditions in the bylaw.
An unreasonable condition or criterion would be one that effectively denies the use, permitted use. It was a permitted use, and you impose conditions that effectively deny it. That would be unreasonable.
So you lost my train of thought. The take home is that the bylaws assumed to be reasonable. You're applying the bylaws reasonable conditions.
But it would be unreasonable to think they could have 3 or 4 permitted uses all on the same site. if we found that there were too many uses.
And you get to interpret that.
Yeah.
By our reasonable interpretation of the bylaw is that you can only have 2, and then they would have to appeal the building permit. So
Right.
That's an example of a reasonable condition. Our interpretation says you can only have 3 units. If it was very unreasonable, all gee whiz, you can have 50 or 60, then someone might appeal.
Applicant might think it's reasonable.
Now, let's take the example you gave
Yeah.
of the site where there was, as
Drag this out.
designed with the placement of the building, with no reasonably safe location for the tank truck operating
Right.
gas tank. Now, there you might just simply say it cannot be used for that purpose because you cannot. But if there was a way that you could, that the applicant could redesign the site so that a safe loading area could be fit into the lot, then you could condition it upon, that's what he's got to do.
Right, correct. And you find a reasonable solution, or you have found a reasonable solution in combination. So just, here's an example from a community that, I'll skip through these quickly. Yeah, you can read that. So some of the things to consider on a site plan review, and it gets into some of the things we talked about before, about parking and landscaping and whatnot, is to look at the surrounding land uses. That's an industrial building. This is actually in Leominster, Massachusetts, on a busy street. This is an industrial mill that's across the street. And then they have a gas station as a adjacent neighbor. And they have residences in the back. And why do we point these things out to you? Is because when you look at your site plan, it's important to take a look. This is why we take a view around the site sometimes, is we want to take a look at just who your neighbors are and what we might want to do in terms of, buffers and landscapes. So there are various components to a site plan. They start with the building plan. The building plan is really the keystone, the cornerstone of a site plan, because everything typically flows out of where you're going to put your building. You define your setbacks, you define your lot coverage. You'll see sometimes your first floor elevations will determine the height of your structure. The use of the building as square footage will drive your parking formula typically. So those are the types of things you'll see on a site plan that we try to get into when we see where that building is. Setbacks, lot coverage, elevations for height, and square footage for parking. Those are usually the key things you look at for a building. And as they're building under construction, it's a lovely building, it's going to look like that stuff. And your building plan just drives your parking plan. Your parking plan, we try to take a look at, obviously, the number of parking spaces, and the square footage, the number of handicapped parking spaces that you need, where they are on the site, how they're located. We might reasonably say, Paul, you need to move within those setback areas some of your handicapped parking spaces. That's a reasonable condition. Our bylaw lets us do that. Whereas opposed to where you have them, we don't, like down there in the lower right-hand corner near Lancaster Street. Here. We may reasonably say, as a reasonable condition, our bylaw empowers us to do it, move things, imposition of a reasonable condition. And that's their beautiful parking lot, that's looking good there, next to their residential neighbors and other neighbors. Then we look at access, and to a certain extent traffic. For more access here under site plan review, you notice they have 2 openings here on Lancaster Street. And this little opening here to the overflow. We might reasonably, under our conditions, say, gee whiz, your curb cut to your overflow needs to be moved away further from your building. The bylaw says it has to be so many feet to a handicap spot. We can move it around. The idea there is circulation. When I say traffic, it's more circulation, your access getting in and out of the site is something we try to look at very intently under site plan review. And again, to landscaping and screening. And why do we do that? That's why we always take a look at our surrounding land uses. We put a fence next to the residential land uses in the back that we saw before. And we just might have some low shrubs along the road because there's an industrial building across the street from us. I try to have more of a visual shade because the headlights are pointing out into the public way. If they were in Falmouth, we'd probably have a privet hedge or something there, seagrass, something that makes it a little less conspicuous and a little less dangerous for people driving by with the headlights, especially at night. And then under site plan review, all those other things we look at grading and drainage. Again, it's design standards. We like to have open grass swales under the bylaw. We typically refer these to the Department of Public Works for any design details that require a peer review of a stamped engineered plan. But the bylaw, if you look under Article 22 or whatever it is, the design bylaw, we get very specific about stormwater management. Keep it on site, keep it on your property. If you're going to leave your property, it has to go to the public domain or to an easement. And that's a beautiful picture of the grading and drainage. Then we look at, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, you mentioned in a situation like this, you might do something to mitigate the headlights in traffic. Could you give me a quick example of what that might be?
In particular, you said privet hedge or salt
Notice
grass.
how the parking spaces are pointing out into the public way?
Yeah.
That means at nighttime, the headlights will be shining into the road.
Oh, I see. So this parking lot serves that building across the street?
Let's see.
No, it's interfering with the roadway.
It's interfering with the roadway. In other words, define the site plan. These parking spaces
In Lancaster Street.
are shining out into Lancaster Street. You see how they have the landscaping detail here?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Now, we might reasonably impose a condition that states, well, no, that landscaping in that location for that purpose is insufficient. Our bylaw says we have to have suitable buffers between public ways and headlights.
Can we tell them what we think that pseudo buffer is?
And we'll say, we want you to replace your, we want you to replace that, the rock.
Yeah,
The rock doesn't make it for us.
right.
Right.
The rock is probably going to get banged into by someone who jumps the curb. We want you to replace these with something that's evergreen and has a certain height that would knock down the glare of headlights shining into the public way,
4-foot privet.
like a privet.
A privet hedge, okay. That's a possibility for that application.
And that would be a reasonable condition to impose that the bylaw allows you to do because your performance standards you find in Article 22, 3, and 4 allow you to do so. We don't like this, but we.
How about the height of that hedge? Where does that,
It would have to be above
That's,
headlights.
The height would want to be high enough to block the headlight glare, but not so high that it blocks a reasonable view of the signage on the building.
right, the signs are usually typically higher, or,
so 4 or 5 feet? I'm just trying to,
right.
I said 4 feet.
Again, I don't, 4 feet usually. You figure you're on 6
right.
foot,
Well,
so-
in Falmouth, we have a lot of privet hedges around. It's a,
Right, or you might say you have to put we might reasonably say you need to angle your parking spaces so they don't shine directly into the public way. Or you can take that parking lot and turn it 90 degrees. that might not be a reasonable condition.
Right.
A
Right.
reasonable
The
condition
number
might be
of
to,
spaces you need,
right,
in
you might
traffic calm.
say to them, based on a referral to the design review committee, give us some guidance, design review on what you think.
What
might
they
be-
think, we can tell them the problem, let them solve it.
There you go.
Okay.
How high should it be?
Right.
Don't shoulder that burden. Gee whiz, we think the headlights shining out into Lancaster Street are a good idea. We're not into the shrubs and the rocks, no. Find a better, go see the design review committee, get a better idea of what might be a reasonable condition.
Or come
But-
up with your own.
We can send the design review committee our concerns though, so they can address it.
They could do that, or you can say, come back and see us, go hire a landscape architect or something, come back and see us. This doesn't meet our bylaw standards of glare into public ways. The checklist that we're checking off, so we can't say check.
But that's not really a design review issue, because it has nothing to do with
Well, they get
aesthetic.
to,
It's got everything to do with public safety.
they get into the landscape, and they might have better feel.
It's a little bit of both.
A little bit of both, But that's something, public safety issue, bylaw addresses it, public safety.
We're not really concerned how it looks, we're concerned, so if they wanted to put up a 4-foot stockade fence,
Right.
that would meet our standards. It might be ugly as hell, but
It might not meet our aesthetic standards, but the purpose of the addition is to reduce the glare of the headlights. in the public way. And the last thing we typically look at is utilities. We sometimes look at sewer connections, but we're always looking at hydrant locations, dumpster location is big, I know, lighting, those types of utility standards you see out there. We typically defer to the Board of Public Works or the Department of Public Works, because they have the design standards for hydrants and whatnot. The fire departments are where they want to be located. We typically don't put hydrants that close to parking because we don't want someone's car parked there while we have a firefighter trying to dig that out of snow or whatever, and try to separate them away from parking fields. So that's site plan review in a nutshell in 1 hour. I did it half the time.
The location of fire hydrants, so that's not our call, that's the fire department's call, right? They're the ones, we don't get to comment on that. That gets submitted to them and they draw it up.
They draw it up under site plan review.
Right.
We have typically,
Then we take their work and we go from there.
and even as a special permit granting authority, you probably wouldn't, the fire department.
If they've approved it, it just keeps going.
99.9999% of the time,
Yep.
you're gonna go with that location.
They would have to be asleep.
You got that right. The utility boxes, we try to guard them. This is an electrical box. A reasonable condition to impose would be around your utility box, we want some balance, because we got lots of people here who drive off the road now. And that's it, not 1 hour. Want to take a break, and I'll set up the next hour?
5 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
5-minute break.
If you think of any questions, let me know, because special permits are a little more involved.
We're ready to roll if you are.
You are? Okay, I'm just trying.
What do you think, you need a break?
I just gotta stretch my legs is all.
Or else, you mentioned last time one was too long, plus but this week from this, and get rid of this one, get the next one.
Just gonna stand up.
Yeah.
I was heartbreaking. I knew it was gonna happen. Handwriters on the wall, but that was heartbreaking.
Sound like they're blaming it on the patient.
27 people from Cape Cod in southeastern Massachusetts.
You're not taking minutes?
This is usually the best seller.
Good idea.
But we'll skip variances tonight, that's for boards of appeals. Be nice if we had some time to
Nobody's
learn
going
about
to stay.
variances, it's very important. But we'll skip over variances and go right to special permits. Special permits, this was put together by Professor Mark Dabowski from the New England School of Law, giving you credit. Whereas the other presentation was done by the Market Review Commission.
Brian, when I first came on the board years ago, you had a chart. There was a chart that you gave us of the differences between special permits and variances. And I still got it, and it was a great comparison and easy to follow. Did you still have that chart?
That was done by Don Schmidt back in 1979, 1980. It's called land use management, to give you the differences between special permits and variances.
Is it still valid?
Oh, yeah. A lot of it's still valid. Some things have changed, but a lot of it's still valid. In fact, I used it on this course down east. In fact, I handed it out.
So how would we use that chart and get it updated? If you say it's not,
It's pretty much up to date. I think variances now, you have 100 days instead of 75 days.
Oh, well,
There's
yeah.
some minor changes,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it hasn't changed since 1975.
okay. I just thought it would be useful for the rest of the board to have that chart. I don't know if other people
Well-
have it or not.
Let's stick with special permits for now,
Well, I understand that.
but we can get into variances a bit. I think it's very important to understand what variances are and why we have them and how they relate with special
Yeah,
permits.
okay.
And I think when we do this again someday, when we get into variances, perhaps with the Board of Appeals, we can bring that variance versus.
Okay.
All right, so special permits. This is paragraph 1 of section 9 of 40A general law. That's the paragraph you need to be really attentive to. And I'll go through it sentence by sentence, almost word by word.
48 what?
Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9, first paragraph. Section 9 of Chapter 48 is entitled Special Permits. Special permits, zoning ordinances or bylaws, and with a bylaw for the town, shall provide for specific types of uses, keywords, which shall only be permitted in specific districts on the issuance of a special permit. Special permits regulate that middle tier of uses allowed as a matter of right over here, and uses that are prohibited over here. The specific types of uses are special permit uses in specific districts. The example would be in a single residence district, a single family house is allowed as a matter of right. Multifamily dwellings are prohibited, but you can have a two-family house in a single residence district through the issuance of a special permit. Special permits, so they're used to authorize a very specific itemized use. And you get to decide whether that use goes forward after you've taken a look at very specific criteria. Special permits may be, that's why I get to the in seconds. Special permits may be issued only for uses which are in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance or bylaw. What does that mean? Remember, under the wind systems bylaw, I always said go back to paragraph 1. If all else fails, go back to the purpose of the bylaw. So whether it's the general purpose or a specific purpose found in a very specific sentence, you can only issue it when you find it's in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the bylaw. That's the first criteria. There's other criteria, and shall be subject to the general, keyword, or specific provisions set forth therein. The general provisions are section 216 of the zoning bylaw. We're going to be coming back to section 216 a lot. Those are the general provisions. Or specific provisions. When we issued the special permit for the air park, it was a special permit for the planned residential development, and there were specific provisions, 4 out of 7 you had to find. Remember that? And I made you find them? Set forth therein. And such permits may impose conditions, safeguards, and limitations on time or use. When we say time or use, we're not talking about hours of operation. Special permits can expire and go away. Limitations on use. You have the ability to say you can only use a specific permit in specific locations at specific times for specific purposes. In other words, you have great discretion. You are, when it comes to special permits for uses. The courts have also said we can actually have special permits for dimensions. And in our bylaw, we do that too. We have special permits for dimensional requirements for lot coverage, lot width, front yard parking, a special permit. Some say it's more of a use, but I think it's a setback kind of an issue. Special permits are just the opposite of the regulation of the use rather than its prohibition. Special permits are wholly different. Now, the statute, Chapter 48, authorizes certain special permits. Even though Chapter 48 is not an enabling statute, and we talked about enabling statutes, the legislature just wants to make it clear that cities and towns are authorized to do that. You're in conformance with the general statute. For increases in density, we have density bonuses. We have that in our bylaw. Multifamily and non-residential zoned areas, the Board of Appeals actually a special permit for multifamily houses and light industrial zones. Cluster and open space developments, that's you guys. Planned unit developments. The Prudential Tower in Boston is a planned unit development, which is different than a planned residential. You'll never see that, but in the city of Boston, they use they're called PUDs, planned unit developments. You'll never see that. Shared elderly housing up to 6 individuals is authorized by the statute. We don't have that in our bylaw, but accessory uses in connection with scientific research we do. We also have adult entertainment in our bylaw, and we have transfer development rights in our bylaw. That's you guys too. That's the special permit granting.
Brian?
Yeah.
How does some things come to the planning board as a special permit granting authority as opposed to the zoning board of appeals?
It's in the bylaw. The town meeting decides that.
No, but what's the trigger?
The trigger is, say, under section 240-125, town meeting voted that the planning board shall be the special permit granting authority for planned residential developments. Under chapter 240.
Like a 40B?
I'm sorry. No,
But-
in other words, the special permit granting authority is always the Board of Appeals.
Right.
Unless somewhere in the bylaw, town meeting has changed that to be you folks or the select. We're at the, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but in particular, I don't want to mention anything specific, but we have one coming to us where there's special permit granting authority, and I want to know what's the trigger?
The trigger is the bylaw system. In other words, for these types of projects that are new construction over so many square feet, you see them.
Okay, so it's new construction and of a certain size.
Right, so it's right, a threshold comes, you are the planning,
Okay.
you are the special permit granting board. Whereas anybody can be the site plan review board, there's only 3 boards under the state law that can issue a special permit. Planning board, zoning board,
Select.
board of select. That's it. That's what it is.
So
Right.
a project of a certain size comes to us.
Based on what's in the local bylaw.
Right.
There's nothing in the statute.
Right.
This states that selectmen, planning, zoning boards, planning boards, and selectmen may be special permit granting.
Brad, from what you said, I gather, and maybe you did mean this, maybe you didn't, that the zoning board, in the absence of other designations, the zoning board is the default.
Yes, they are the default board.
The zoning board is the default for special permits, and then bylaws, specific bylaws can make us or the selectmen be the,
Right, but it has to be voted at town meeting,
right.
who does what when.
Brian, I just wanted to let you know that every other page in this handout is missing.
Ah,
So,
That's because they ran it, there was a double-sided.
I know.
They ran it through one way, it didn't-
okay, well, sorry about that.
and I myself would love to have a full copy of
We
this.
will make sure you get a full copy. It's that duplex copying will get you every time.
It does.
These are the
Sorry
correct.
about that, let me write that down. And what I'll do is I'll email you.
That'd be
That's
great,
fine,
yeah.
sure.
Let me email it to you. Was it for both of them?
No, just this one.
Yes, okay.
Is this one?
All right.
Geez, yeah.
Well, we'll
It's just
make sure
there,
you get a
so
full
read
one.
less.
Thank you.
And I'll make
I
sure
wouldn't
that's-
mind getting an email the other one either. If you could send me both.
I'll send you both.
Both, be good to have.
Um, Another key slide, another key words here, adequate standards. Your local or bylaw must provide adequate standards for guidance of the board to grant or withhold a special permit. And the key thing here is that standards need not be so detailed as to eliminate discretion. So when you look at section 216, study of park, you'll see the suitability of the site, the adequacy of utilities, the impacts to neighborhoods. It doesn't say very specific, detailed performance standards. You might have that as specific criteria elsewhere in the bylaw, but section 216 are just that, they're general standards.
And we have to find that they all are met.
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. And those other articles, your site plan reviews, those other articles help you get there. We'll talk about that soon. But the key word here is that you have to have adequate standards, and they have to be in the bylaw. Because when we get to decision time, section 216, and your site plan review and all that goes into, it's going to help you make those decisions. You're limited to the criteria detailed in the bylaw, section 216. The plan is the general criteria. Under plan residential developments, you have 4 out of that 7 criteria, or whatever it was, I forget exactly what it was. You don't have unbridled discretion, but you may not refuse to issue a permit for reasons that are unrelated to the standards in the bylaw. I've decided that, or we as the board decided that we don't like your architecture. Can't do it. You have to, again, it's somewhat formula-based, it has to be in the bylaw. You can't be outside of the bylaw. Such as you can't base your decision on the reputation of the applicant. And you'd be amazed when the boards throughout the Commonwealth who do that. When you get to the special permit, Jim is right, you must make an affirmative finding as to the existence of each condition of the statute or the bylaw requiring the granting of the special permit. So under section 216, I think you have 9 findings. And then under, say, plan residential development, you have another 4. You must make them all. Failure of one means that no special permit can issue. That's the decision of the board, not just one board. You have to make that finding for each and every one. If a board decides to deny an application, typically speaking, your decision will be upheld. You have not unbridled, but you have great discretion as a special permit granting authority. You are not in site plan review world anymore. You have the ability to use your discretion, make your findings. If you find that you can't, and if you can make them within a reasonable, I think, based on my knowledge, experience with the bylaw, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get done. It doesn't mean that, however, you should try to find a reasonably conditioned approval. Most of the times, we try to do that. So you can actually impose conditions, safeguards, and limitations. This is from the first paragraph, section 9, on the issuance of your special permit. Whereas before we talked about the 300-foot dimension on
Drive-throughs?
Drive-throughs where it might be. And as a site plan review board, that's it, that's all you can do.
250, it doesn't happen.
As a special permit granting authority, you can impose conditions, safeguards, and limitations on the issuance of your permit. If, in your discretion, you can reasonably impose a greater standard, you can do it, based on what you find and the evidence that's put in front of you as part of a hearing, a real hearing. We won't get too much into procedure tonight, but you're holding a hearing. You're making a decision on property rights that's appealable to Superior Court.
So there'd be testimony or something that we could base our decision on.
Yep, you're taking testimony, the whole bit, whereas in the site plan review world, it's check, check, check. And you're listening to the public, but you're not holding a hearing. You're just soliciting some comments that has absolutely no standing whatsoever.
That's like the other night when we were granting that site plan review, and Mr. Haddad, we allowed comment in, but we made it clear that that comment could have no effect on our decision.
Yeah, it's a site plan review.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was a special permit hearing. You should just stop the music. We're not talking about this and that. It's very much more structured. We won't get into conditioning of things. You can pretty much condition everything you see in a site plan review, but you have much more discretion. You can actually, as a special permit granting authority, you can, unlike a variance, condition the special permit on terms of ownership. This special permit is for you and you only. We do that for gravel mining. The special permit that the Board of Appeals issues here for gravel mining is for 3 years only, limits of time it use, and is limited to you, the particular owner. It's not transferable. It doesn't run with the land like a variance. It can go away, and it can only be issued under your discretion to that one particular applicant. And here's again another very important point. You'll always notice that when I write a decision for you, I start out with you approve the application for a plan entitled, and I cite the plan, the date, the revisions, who drew it, how many pages there are. When you issue that special permit, and you state that these are the plans to conform to, those are the plans. That's it. No other board can change it, the building commissioner can't change it. Unlike a site plan review, those are the plans of record. They get recorded at the registry of deeds. In many counties, we're not Barnstable County a lot, but Many counties, those plans are recorded at the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds when I worked in the city of Wayne. They become part of your deed. And you get to dictate exactly what those plans are. Unlike a site plan review, technically the building commissioner or the board of appeals could reverse it.
So now, in the process of the work, is there latitude for administrative approval by your department?
We'll get to that. We're going to get to that. Delegation of authority. No. You are in charge. Here's the case in point. Years ago, the Board of Appeals issued a special permit for the property that is the honeydew down next to the driving range. And one of the conditions was the final curb cut will be reviewed by the town planner and town engineer prior to the occupancy of issuance of occupancy permits. Of course, it was litigated in both the court. And General O'Neill, Justice of the Superior Court, said, no, you're not, the town engineer and town planner, you're nice guys, but no. Those are the types of details that have to be worked out prior. Unlike an administrative review, on a site plan review. Okay, we'll have the town planner review the plan and check off on the landscaping. You can actually delegate the authority. But the litmus case, hang on, Rich. The litmus case was back in Shrewsbury, back in 1986. It was a condition required before the start of operation. A detailed plan of dust control must be submitted to the Board of Appeals for approval. It was declared invalid by the appeals court. Requiring the standard must be worked out before the issuance of the special.
Cannot the administrator of the department reject a plan that is inadequate on its face?
Nope. When it comes to a special permit application, that's why you will see them. I wouldn't take in a special permit application and say, oh, I'm rejecting this on its face. In 65 days, when you don't hold a hearing, we go back and start to grant. It always comes back to the special permit granting authority. You must make that decision.
Could you then just simply, as the administrator, decide to bring it before the board on short notice for that kind of review? Just on the facial?
You are not in site plan review world. You are in special permit granting.
I find that interesting because...
No, you have to hold it.
So hearing, testimony, all those things have to happen.
You shall.
But why this is interesting is because as an attorney, and I've done this once or twice, you're not proud of it, but
Public hearing.
if I file a complaint in the Superior Court and it is facially incomplete or facially invalid, the clerk will reject it and send it back to me and say, got to redraft it and refile. It's not it's without prejudice. But
Somewhere the rules of the court or the Supreme Judicial Court has come down. Those are the rules of the court, and they have empowered the clerk to do that. I'm not empowered to take an application for a special permit and say, bring it in front of you and say, here, reject this. It's clear. You have to hold the hearing. Now, the applicant could say, oh, gee, what is it? Before the publication, the first publication of notice, the applicant can come to you and say, gee, what is it? I just had it out with the town planner and it's not going anywhere. I'd like to withdraw my application. And then the board must vote, okay, without prejudice. Off you go. But, you know,
can you as a planner,
no,
look at it and say to the applicant, look, I have to bring this before the board, but I can tell you that this and that, those two conditions, those two required statements are missing. You can't do that?
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time.
Advise them.
Oh, yeah, I can advise you. Look, I think the board's going to not be too happy with this, and you may want to change your plan this way.
Or add some more information on these points so that the board will have something to work with.
But there are people who take my advice, and there are those who come in and say, and then withdraw their applications typically. But what I'm trying to drive home tonight is a special permit granting authority. You're not in site plan review. You can use a site plan review to determine and use your discretion whether or not that permit can issue. And you have great latitude and discretion, so long as you are somewhat within the bylaw, you find that you can't reasonably say yes to one of the standard general conditions or specific conditions, and you will typically be upheld. When you think about it, when's the last time have seen a court overrule a special permit hearing? Pretty rare. You have to really be, okay, well, I'll do this. Something outside the bylaw, and we didn't like the applicant. I don't want to get into a lot of procedural requirements tonight, because this is part of the presentation for towns that don't have professional staff. Just want to give you a flavor of what Joyce and others do, and what the procedural requirements that you have as a board, and what happens after your decision leaves the hearing and goes out there into the world of courts or non-courts. Again, it's a, remember the discussion we had on how to hold a public hearing? It all starts with the application. They file an application, the clerk certifies it, list of the butters. The application can be withdrawn prior to publication, just as I stated. But the town planner says this is going nowhere. I don't want to waste your time or the board's time. After the notice, only you as a board can allow the withdrawal of a special permit application. We have to hold the hearing, Rich, within 65 days, unless he withdraws the application or gives us an extension. You'll often see, you're going to get one next week, an extension of the time frame.
What's the minimum time?
65 days.
No, the minimum time.
Yeah.
What's the minimum time with which we can, that's the maximum time with which we can, what's the minimum time? Do we have to wait a certain amount of time before having the hearing, or can we do it the next week?
No, you have to publish the hearing in a newspaper for 2 weeks.
Okay, so 2 weeks is
So,
effectively, 3
I
weeks
tell
is effectively.
folks, the day you apply, it's 30 days before it's received. Usually it's 45.
Okay, so that's the minimum, 30 days.
It's 30 days.
All right.
You can extend that time, that's why you see those times, something will come in.
And the publishing's twice, right? It's like 2 weeks?
You have to publish it twice in successive weeks. So,
1 week.
successive, so you could say you could do Monday in the Cape Cod Times 1 week, Friday in the Cape Cod Times the next week, and then hold your hearing. In Falmouth, we publish the Enterprise, it comes out on Tuesday. So usually it's Tuesday, you can publish it 3 times and then hold a hearing, because you can't count the day of the hearing. We'd have to publish it Monday, the 1st, and then Monday, the 8th, to hear it on the 15th. You can't count the day of the hearing. A lot of procedural stuff, we take care of that for you. You have to, and we'll be talking about this a bit, you have to state the nature of what you want. You just can't apply for a special permit. Come in front of the board and say, well, what do you think, which sections of the bylaw apply? You have to tell the board, I want a contractor's yard special permit, or I want a planned residential development. This can't come in front of you and guess. And believe it or not, it happens.
I think I want a dentist office.
Yeah, I think, but I'm not sure. But can you tell me what I want? No, we can't. We don't do that.
Can you apply for more than one at the same time?
Medical.
The answer is yes, but you have to specify it in your application.
Right, so you 240, blah, 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 blah.
Right. Now, if it's separate and distinct, let's say I want a contractor's yard special permit, and as part of my contractor's yard, I want a reduction in lot coverage or a reduction in lot width that makes sense. You can bundle them together. You couldn't apply for a contractor's special permit.
And multifamily housing,
Right.
Okay.
No, no.
and/or.
And/or, no.
No and/ors.
You could, but we're going to hold a hearing on this application on this day, and we're going to hold a hearing on the other.
So it's all ands, no and/ors.
We publish it for you, we make sure it's 2 successive weeks, we post it in this town hall 14 days before the hearing. We notice all parties in interest for you, the petitioner, the abutters, to the abutters, regional planning agencies, all those people that the state law says we have to for procedural purposes. You never see it. Thank your lucky stars. Voting requirements for a special permit granting authority. If you're a zoning board of 3 members, it's a unanimous vote. If you're a planning or zoning board of 5 members, you need 4 out of 5. This is a 7-member board. You need 2/3, that's 5. Means you need 5. 7 means you need 5 votes. Doesn't mean 2/3 of the board. That might be, you may have 6.
The quorum, it has to be who's there. It has to be the total board.
It's the total board. You always need 5 to issue. You don't need 5 to say no, but you need 5 to say yes. Let's say you vote no. 4 of the board members could vote no, and 3 could vote yes. The no's will prevail. But you need 5 to issue. A distinction that's sometimes lost on a lot of boards.
That's a logical distinction because if you don't get, if 4 vote against it, you don't get the 5.
Right, but the quanta of vote for a no is less than the quanta of vote for a yes.
But that's because the quantum, yeah, that just means if you don't get the 5, then you are denied.
It always depends on the motion that's made. I make a motion to approve. We need 5 for the motion to carry. If we get 4, motion doesn't carry. I've always advised boards, you need another motion.
Motion to deny.
Some boards.
Motion to deny, you only need 4.
4. So make it a motion that passes. I've seen boards do that. Okay, 4 yeses, 3 noes. Motion doesn't carry procedurally. I'll make another motion.
Oh, right, but in effect, if you don't get the 5, then that means that the 4 can make that other motion to deny.
So long as it's made.
If they don't, and procedurally goes over 65 days, it gets approved.
Right.
I've always cautioned boards, I've seen boards do that. I always say, make another motion
Right.
and make it pass. Make something, the board has taken,
Some action.
one of the things, the decision time limits, you have 90 days after the close of the hearing, not 90 days from the opening of the hearing. 90 days from the close. So you have 65 days to open it, and you can continue it. You can't be ridiculous about it. But you could continue it for a year if you had to. We don't like doing that because you lose
People.
people or interest or whatever. But it's 90 days after the close of the hearing. You make a decision. Variances, it's 100 days after the application. We mail them out to the applicant for you, all the parties of interest, and every person at the hearing who requests that a decision be sent to them. It's up to the applicant to record a special permit at the Registry of Deeds. If you don't record it, it goes away, it goes poof, it doesn't exist until you record it.
Is there a time limit on the recording?
6 months. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 years. 6 months is I think it's 2 years. Well, unless they come back to you, and you extend it for good cause.
But often you can't get your building permit until you've got your filing done anyway.
Right. So I think it's pretty sure it's 2 years.
I can't tell.
Yeah, 2 years. How about that? It lapses after 2 years. You go out and dig some dirt, you're usually okay. I've always been of the opinion that if you do something in reliance upon your permit, you activate it, you've mortgaged your property, you've got a bank loan or a commitment, you've acted on the permit, off you go.
Transferred it?
Maybe. But that's the real quick procedural stuff on special permits. The take-home lesson tonight is site plan review, administrative, no discretion, formula, special permits, you can use your site plan review, you have great discretion. It's not unbridled discretion contained in the bylaw, but you're not in site plan review. And that's in a nutshell, that's the 4 hours in an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Good job, Brian, thanks.
Chairman?
Yeah, just a minute. Yes.
Brian, we spent a lot of time tonight talking about the bylaws, and it's generally acknowledged the bylaws in the town of Falmouth need updating, and in particular, the chairman of the zoning board of appeals was pushing for review of the bylaws. My understanding that less than the amount of money requested was approved for reviewing the bylaws. Do we have any sense of how long it's going to take, whether there be a second stage in that? Because a lot of this is predicated on the bylaws. If the bylaws are inconsistent, in many cases they are,
Yeah.
where are we with that process?
Well, it's up in front of town meeting, I think it's the $35,000. If you want, we can put it on your agenda for next week, and I can include you in on where it stands. It's not on your agenda tonight.
No, it isn't, but we discussed bylaws a lot tonight.
Well, yeah, understood. In a nutshell, it's 35 out of the 55. It'll make a sizable dent. And I'm trying to remember what article number it is. I think it's Article 10 at the annual town meeting. I think the finance committee said, start here. If you need more, put on the system. I think that was the posture.
Is there a time frame for that? Is there a time frame for
Oh,
that?
right, annual town meeting monies become available to start July 1st. So they
With
would
how
have-
long they have to review bylaws with the limited budget? Is it a year process, is it a 3-month process?
There's no process set up yet. They would have to retain a consultant. Develop a scope of work for the consultant to review. So it might be that, think about what in the bylaws that you find confusing or contradictory or whatever. Write them down. Because the scope of work when it's developed, I'm sure you'll have a great say.
Thank you.
And then you'll procure someone with that money. Probably take 2 years.
Thank you.
That was 35 out of 55, you said, right? Okay, so 55 was an estimate or was that the deal? Okay.
So
And is it, over what amount do you have to go out to bid?
Well, legal services.
10,000, isn't it?
Legal, if you hire another lawyer, you don't have to go for 30B procurement. We'll do it anyhow.
Okay.
But legal services don't require 30B.
Okay. And what is that limit, though? 10,000, is it? Anything over 10,000? You have 25,000? Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so we've covered that. Correspondence, Brian, you said there's none? Items for future agenda. Paul?
I just want to mention the precinct meetings begin tomorrow night,
All right.
and I believe I'm supposed to go to one tomorrow night. Is someone else going to that one? I think it's
Number
precinct 7.
1?
Number 7, I think it's tomorrow night.
I'm
1
going,
and 2 are together on the 4th, I believe.
Yeah, I think I'm in 7.
well, we've already decided who's going to
Yeah, I
what.
was just wondering who was going to.
Oh, yeah, who's going?
I don't remember which one's which, but I'll tell you.
I'm scheduled to go. I was wondering if someone else was going.
All right, just to go over it again. Bob, are you going to 8 and 9 again with me?
Yeah.
That's tomorrow night?
Is it
Okay.
tomorrow night?
Right.
I hadn't looked at the.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Jim, you're going to
1 and 2,
1 and 2.
for sure.
Pat, you're
5 and 6.
I'm on 3 and 4, I believe.
3 and 4. Rich, are you on 1 or not?
1 and 2?
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Yeah, I'm 1 and 2 as well, and 7.
So it looks like you're at 7 on your own then, I guess. It must be
7
different
tomorrow
nights,
night, 1
right?
and 2 next week, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're all happy? Anybody else for an agenda item in the future here?
Ralph,
Yes, Bob.
at our local comprehensive plan meeting, we've been talking about the housing element, and we were wondering if you could give us an update on Little Pond and the CPC at the next meeting?
I could, but I think that we have a subcommittee on the CPC that could probably, would probably give you the best update. And then let's see if we're going to meet before then. I'll give it a try, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. On the Little Pond Landing, in other words, is
Yeah.
what you want. Okay. Okay, anybody else? Anything? I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.